In the olden days, when kingdoms clashed like thunderclouds and the song of the sword was never far from the ear, there were warriors whose names became immortal. Kings, jarls, and knights sung by bards. Yet among them walked women, fierce as winter gales, unyielding as the iron in their blades, whose stories have been muffled by the dust of time. In the sagas of the North, such women were called shield maidens, maidens who bore the shield and chose the path of battle instead of the hearth. For long centuries, scholars brushed them aside as fireside fancies. Aye, they said, fine for a saga, but not for history. But the ground has begun to speak. Buried bones, ancient steel, and the patient work of archaeologists have breathed life into the possibility that these women were not just the dreams of poets, but flesh and blood. If the bards kept their names in song, the earth kept their proof in silence, until spade and science pried open what memory forgot. And as each grave is unearthed, as each sword is studied, the old tales begin to stir once more, whispering that history may have been far braver and far more diverse than we were ever taught. Shield maidens in the Norse sagas, steel-clad legends. The sagas of the Norse were not mere bedtime tales. They were woven tapestries of pride, memory, and warning. They carried the weight of ancestral honor, the lessons of victory and defeat, and the echoes of voices long gone. Among their threads stride women who took up arms, defying the order of their time and stepping boldly into the realm of warriors. Lagertha is perhaps the best known, appearing in the 12th century writings of Saxo Grammaticus, who tells of her fighting beside Ragnar Lothbrok, the scourge of kings. When Ragnar's men faltered, it was Lagertha who charged, hair flowing behind her helm, cutting through the enemy like a storm given form. She was no mere ornament of the tale. She was the heartbeat of its triumph, a living rebuke to those who thought the shield was the sole right of men. Brynhildr, carved into the Volsunga saga, was a Valkyrie fated to guide the slain to Odin's hall. Yet she was no wisp of myth. She was armored, unafraid of blood, her tale one of passion, vengeance, and a tragic fall that shook the halls of men and gods alike. Her choices were her own, even when fate itself pressed against her. And then there is Hervor, who took the name Hervard, lived as a warrior among men, and once sailed alone to an island of the dead to claim her father's cursed sword. The wind howled, the ground shook, yet she stood unflinching as the dead rose to answer her call, her voice unwavering in the face of terror. Such tales blur the line between history and myth. For centuries, scholars scoffed at the notion of Viking women at war. Such ideas, they claimed, belonged to the realm of sagas and romanticized fiction, not the annals of serious history. But in 2017, a grave in the Swedish town of Birka proved otherwise, or at least cracked the certainty of that old belief. First unearthed in the 19th century, the grave was no ordinary resting place. It held a warrior's riches, a fine sword, an axe polished smooth from use, a spear fit for piercing shield walls, a quiver of arrows, 2 sturdy shields, 2 war horses buried at her side, and even a strategy board, the prized tool of a commander, suggesting a mind trained not only for battle, but for its orchestration. For over 100 years, the occupant was assumed to be male. The logic was blunt. Weapons meant a warrior, and warriors were men. DNA tests told another story. The bones belonged to a woman. The revelation sparked fierce debate. Was she truly a warrior, or buried with these goods as symbols of status? Yet the completeness of her kit and her burial among proven fighters spoke volumes. If she was not a warrior, why honor her as one at all? Birka lit a torch that shone on other finds across Scandinavia. Women buried with swords, axes, and shields, some with bones marked by healed battle wounds or the muscular build of lifelong arms practice. One grave in Norway held a woman with a brooch on her breast, a sword at her side, and arrows by her head. Another in Denmark yielded a woman with fine jewelry and a battle axe, as if she could grace both feast and fight. Perhaps not all fought in battle. Some may have been honored in death for reasons we can't know. Yet together, these graves form a pattern too persistent to ignore, one in which at least some Viking women truly walked the warrior's path. Viking society, while far from egalitarian, granted women freedoms rare in medieval Europe: the right to own property, inherit land, and seek divorce. Most tended home and trade, but in times of war, when men were away or slain, women may have defended their holdings themselves with whatever weapons they had. Others joined expeditions alongside fathers, brothers, or husbands, sharing both the risks and rewards. The archaeological finds, jewelry beside swords, speak to a life of blended roles, silver one day, steel the next without hesitation. Law, custom, and necessity braided together, making the shield maiden not just a romantic figure, but a practical reality, born of survival and choice. In 1412, in the quiet village of Domremy, a peasant girl was born whose destiny would be bound to the fate of France. Joan of Arc claimed visions from saints, guiding her to lift the siege of Orléans and crown Charles VII as king. The court laughed at first, but her certainty was unshakable. Soon she was clad in steel, riding with her banner white as lilies, rallying troops through fire and arrow. Soldiers swore her presence alone restored their courage. Her victories were swift, but betrayal struck harder than any sword. Captured, tried for heresy, and burned at 19, she left behind not ashes, but a legend, proof that faith and will could reshape the fate of kingdoms. In 12th century Japan, during the Genpei War, Tomoe Gozen rode at the head of Minamoto clan troops. She was no court lady bound by etiquette. She was a commander, skilled with bow and sword, feared by enemies and respected by allies across the battlefield. At the Battle of Awazu, outnumbered and surrounded, she cut down foes like a storm through reeds, unhorsing warriors with a single sweep of her blade. Her fate is uncertain, but her name still rides the wind in the songs and stories of Japan. In 11th century Italy, Matilda of Tuscany fought not only with swords, but with politics and strategy as her greatest weapons. In the clash between the Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope, she stood firm for the papacy, turning her castles into strongholds of determined resistance. Legends claim she personally led charges, banner in hand, driving back imperial troops who underestimated the woman who dared defy emperors. Through decades of relentless war, she held her lands and shaped the political map of Italy for generations to come. The Mongol Empire's vastness was not the work of men alone. It stretched across continents, and when Khans rode to war or fell in battle, Khatun's, queens and consorts, ruled in their stead. Toraghane Khutulun, after her husband Ogedei Khan's death, commanded the largest empire on earth, carefully appointing governors and negotiating with foreign powers. Mandukai Khatun, in the 15th century, donned armor herself, uniting fractured tribes and personally leading them into battle. In the Mongol world, a woman's authority could extend from tent to battlefield, proving leadership was not bound to gender or tradition. In 14th century Brittany, Jeanne de Clisson's husband was executed by the French king. Her grief quickly turned to vengeance. She sold her lands, bought 3 warships, painted them black, and set their sails crimson, a warning to all French vessels that dared cross her path. For over a decade, she prowled the English Channel, capturing ships, executing crews, and vanishing into the mist before any pursuit could catch her. To her enemies, she was a specter, to herself an avenger, seeking justice entirely on her own terms. As Christianity spread through Scandinavia and medieval kingdoms solidified, space for women in war narrowed. The shield maiden became more legend than fact, and even the names of real warrior women faded into obscurity. Yet archaeology, chronicles, and legend together remind us they existed, not as fantasies, but as women who stepped into danger when called. From Viking graves to the battlefields of France, from the steppes of Mongolia to the seas of Brittany, these women defied the boundaries of their age. Some fought for faith, others for power, others still for vengeance, but all carried the same fire. History often dims their light beneath the shadows of kings and lords, but their stories endure, whispering across centuries. Courage knows no gender, valor wears many faces, and the heart of a warrior may beat in any breast. If you listen closely, the past does not whisper, it calls, and sometimes the voice you hear is hers.